Welcome to Climate Talks. Following the recent release of the IPCC Climate Change Report, widely described as a red alert for the future of the planet, we will be asking the question, how vulnerable is South Asia to the threats that have been identified? Today, we will hear the opinions and conclusions of Professor Rajib Shaw, an expert contributor to the deliberations of the IPCC. We'll also conduct a discussion with officials from Nepal in an attempt to build a perspective of what can be done to combat the dangers we face. But first of all, let's remind ourselves of some of the main points to be highlighted by this thought-provoking report.
The IPCC started reporting in 1990, and this is their sixth report. Essentially, this is a reality check, which gives us a much clearer picture of the past, present and future climate. The changes are affecting every region on Earth, and as the South and Southeast Asian territories already know, the monsoon has weakened in the last 50 years, although in the long term, both annual and summer monsoon rainfall will increase. The scientists are confident that heatwaves and humid heat stress will be more intense and more frequent during this century. It's warming everywhere, and it's warming rapidly. For a livable climate, greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced to net zero by 2050. That's the stark warning. In the Himalayas, mountain glaciers will continue to shrink, and extreme precipitation is projected to increase in the major mountainous regions, with potential consequences of floods, landslides, and lake outbursts. Over the past 4 decades, ocean acidification has increased, and the surface of the Indian Ocean has warmed faster than the global average. Small islands will face more intense, but generally fewer tropical cyclones, which means that in coastal cities, the combination of sea level rise, storm surges, extreme rainfall and river overflow will increase the probability of flooding. If efforts to keep global warming below the projected 1.5 degrees are not successful, these projections will increase in severity. With approximately 200 scientific authors contributing to this report, this is the first categorical statement that humans are accentuating the climatic problems, and that government policies and individual actions are essential to avoid worse consequences.
So there we have some of the hard facts from the IPCC report, but let's put some flesh on the bones here. One of the significant contributors to the development of the report was Professor Rajib Shaw. His chair of STAG, the United Nations Science and Technology Advisory Group for Disaster Risk Reduction. Professor Shaw, welcome to Climate Talks. So far as South Asia is concerned, what do you believe were the major messages delivered by this report?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vidya, for having me. Before we go to South Asia, let me just give a few points about the overall report, how it look like. As you know that we have IPCC, the 3 major parts. One more on the science. This is this report which has been released. The another one is on impacts and adaptation, which will be released next year. And the third part is the mitigation. So this report essentially talks about the overall physical science of it, like how climate is changing. And it has 6 specific criteria to describe the overall climate change issues. One is, of course, the temperature. We all know that it is increasing. We have around now 0.99 degree, close to 1 degree centigrade, which is hotter than the previous, at least in the last 2 decades. Then the precipitation, both in terms of snowfall as well as rainfall, which is also increasing, but in differential area. Glacier retreat. In the Arctic, it is retreating. Then upper ocean temperature. When I say upper ocean, it is up to 700 meters, and that is also increasing. It has a very strong connotation on different types of fishes and different other biodiversities. Then we have the sea level rise. Again, we all know that the mean sea level rise is increasing. So that's also increasing. And then the overall, the seasonal changes, like our whole season has been changing on an average 2 days per season. If I say only 2 days, it looks maybe very small, but if you accumulate it over time or over years, So then our season is actually changing, like the summer is becoming a little bit prolonged, or sometimes it is coming late, the winter is coming a little bit late, and so on. So this is essentially the overall the gist of this particular report. Specific to South Asia, I would point out possibly three specific elements. One is the extreme heat, and this is with a very high confidence. And when I say high confidence in IPCC, it says that the science has a very strong confidence to say that the hot extreme weather will increase. In South Asia, we will have more heat waves and humid heat stress. And that is a very, very important factor, which also linked to our health-related issues. It will also have impacts on the agriculture and, very importantly, the cities in South Asia, because cities in South Asia will be more hotter, and that will also impact on the water-related issues. So the urban water stress will be a major problem in near future. That is number one. Number two is the precipitation, which is the rainfall in South Asia. We don't have a very strong confidence level there, but there will be some changes. And especially, as you know, that the South Asia's agriculture very much depend on the monsoon rainfall. So there will be some erratic changes in the monsoon, and there will be certain areas increase, certain areas decrease. So there will be a variation, and that variation actually makes sometimes our future agriculture in a quite uncertain way. So that's number two. And number three is the cyclone. The tropical cyclone, especially in the category of 3 to 5, the numbers will increase, but we are still not sure that how it will increase, which area will be getting more impacted, but there is a clear evidence that this will increase. So the heat wave, the precipitation or rainfall, and the tropical cyclone, these are possibly the three major implications for South Asia.
If we look at the population of this region, 1.6 billion people are at the risk of climate crisis. But on the other hand, we don't see a lot of regional efforts and a lot of collaboration among us different countries. Do you think that regional collaboration is really important and can deliver more to deal with this climate change crisis?
Absolutely. Regional collaboration is possibly the key to mitigate as well as to adapt to the climate change. But here I would like to just focus one thing, that the IPCC in their report does not provide any prescription. So it does not provide any prescription to any government. It just provides the real fact, which are the scientific evidence. Now, it is up to the government how they actually take this and try to address some of the issues. I will try to give maybe again three specific points here, like on the regional cooperation. Like, there have been saying some words which have been flowing in different social media that COVID has vaccine, climate change has no vaccine. I really don't agree on that. Yes, climate change has vaccine, and climate change mitigation and adaptations are the vaccines for climate change. But what we are seeing climate change is possibly a very sort of long-term impact. For us, in our mindset, we think, oh, this is not a real priority at this stage. Something is going to happen in 2100 or much, much beyond that. But COVID-19, what we did is we did it with an urgency. So possibly the whole South Asian region needs to think about climate change as a climate emergency. It is not just a far future issue, and it is happening, and it will really impact. And if we take this as an emergency, I think we can do a major change. And we have seen that how many countries in South Asia, in spite of all different challenges, how it tried to at least address these emerging issues of COVID-19. So I think the main lessons which we can take from the COVID-19 response is try to think climate as a climate emergency and try to have a regional cooperation. That's number one. Number two is we talk about the shared socio-economic pathway, and that is a new thing IPCC is trying to promote. And there are many different ways. Like if we have only the regional rivalry, Like if we try to compete among each other, that is possibly one pathway which will increase almost more than 4 degrees of the temperature in near future. But if we think about more the sustainability and a climate resilient pathway, that possibly will reduce our burden not only to us but our future generation. So I think that shared socioeconomic pathway is one of the very important thing. And my third point, which is again also very important, I take again the example of COVID-19, that we have been seeing that in spite of vaccine, there are uncertainty. And the climate emergency is also full of uncertainty. So we need an adaptive governance mechanism, like the traditional approach of the climate risk mitigation or adaptation is not happening. So we need the new approaches, and by adaptive governance, I don't mean this is an ad hoc governance. It needs to have a scientific justification behind that why we are taking that type of action. And I always say that our success will depend on how we certainly communicate the word uncertainty. So the climate communication becomes very, very important, and communication to the policymakers, communication to the common people of the citizen, communication to the youth and the young population who will actually be living in the future. So I think that communication becomes very, very important, but we have to be very certain to communicate this uncertainty.
For reaction to Professor Rajib's comments, let's turn to Dr. Arun Bhatta, who is Under Secretary Technical at the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Nepal. Dr. Arun, I ask you about the key actions that are being implemented in Nepal to deal with these threats.
Okay, in line with the IPCC 6th assessment report, this year during the last 2 months since the onset of the monsoon, 61 people have lost their lives, 36 went missing, 242 houses fully damaged due to landslides and floods triggered by torrential rains. And this has caused approximately Nepalese rupees 53 million losses, which does not include the cost of human lives and cost of or the value of the ecosystem services, which are not traded in the market. So what Nepal has been doing? Okay, Nepal has already formulated National Climate Change Policy 2019, which is an umbrella policy. It has identified 8 important thematic sectors and 4 cross-cutting areas. We have already enacted Environment Protection Regulation 2020, which clearly mentions that the national vulnerability and risk assessment should be carried out by the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Forest and Environment, which is the focal ministry, and update every 5 years. Similarly, MOPE should prepare National Adaptation Plan and update every 10 years. So in the December last year, Nepal submitted the second NDC to the UNFCCC, which has a very ambitious plan, which is a very gender-friendly, and it plans to formulate climate-resilient and gender-responsive adaptation plans of all the government, local government units. On the mitigation side, despite Nepal's negligible contribution in the global greenhouse gases, the country aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, but Nepal will require USD 25 billion as an international climate finance. So Nepal is preparing National Adaptation Plan, its long-term low greenhouse gas emissions development strategy, NDC implementation plan, Green COVID Recovery Support Framework. So we are doing quite well on the policy front. But however, Nepal believes that the historical failure of the developed countries to limit the global greenhouse gas emissions and temperature rise will have a serious implications for countries like Nepal, because even if we have been successful to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, it will be equivalent to 1.8 degree in the Himalayas. And according to the ICMOR's study, if under the 1.5 degree scenario, we will be losing 1/3 of the snow in the Himalayas by the end of the century. So therefore, Nepal is planning to raise the issue of loss and damage in the COP26, and Nepal is planning to present a national framework for assessing loss and damage, and we will lobby the developed countries to recognize these facts, this fact, and create a separate dedicated financing mechanism to deal with the issues of loss and damage, as especially when the temperature rise is so high and adaptation activities will not work in case of Nepal.
Let's now look specifically at the agriculture and water sectors that command priority actions. So, Dr. Arun, what do you have in the pipeline in Nepal?
Yeah, we are preparing National Adaptation Plan, which will identify short and medium term adaptation activities for the important thematic sectors, including agriculture and water. In the agriculture sector, the important policy instruments are Agriculture Development Strategy 2015-2035, Agroforestry Policy 2019, and Climate Budget Tagging in Agriculture. Nepal has initiated the Climate Budget Code in 2013, but agriculture sector is the first federal ministry which has done more work on this Climate Budget Code and developed 11 criteria, 7 typologies, and monitoring and evaluation framework, as well as reporting mechanism for budget spent on climate change. So in agricultural sector, the focus is not only on adaptation, but also on mitigation through the use of solar and wind powers, and with the help of climate advisory services and crop insurance. MOALD, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development, is promoting adaptation in agriculture. In the livestock sector, pasture and rangeland management, breed improvement, and feed management are already in operation. In the second NDC that we submitted, we have also given some policy targets. For example, we plan to double the soil organic matter of the soil in 10 years' time. We plan to establish 200 climate smart villages, 500 climate smart farms. We plan to establish 77 new organic fertilizer production plant. We have planned to establish 400,000 improved cattle sets for managing urine and dung, which will reduce methane emissions and promote sustainable farming practices. Similarly, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development is preparing a climate resilient agriculture project, realizing the fact that the business as usual type of activities will not work, especially in the face of climate change. In the water sector, Government of Nepal has given emphasis on integrated water resources management, including inter-basin transfers. So the focus is on the multiple use of water. Watershed management plans are already prepared and implemented for the important watersheds of the country. Vulnerability and risk assessment is carried out, and NAP will use these data to further identify the adaptation options for agriculture and water sector. To manage the river systems, agriculture and forestry, Government of Nepal has received a grant worth of US $39.3 million from GCF to implement a project called Building a Resilient Churia region in Nepal, which will be in operation till 2027. This project will provide benefits to nearly 3.2 million people. It will help to improve the agriculture and forestry practices in Nepal, but also it will yield co-benefit. For example, there will be a void of 11.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent through this project.
So we heard Rajib Shaw talking earlier about the need for cooperation and that we need to face these challenges together. Should we have a cooperative regional plan in South Asia?
Yes, I strongly believe that regional cooperation is crucial, as we cannot fight with the climate change in silos. Cross-country experience sharing of climate data and technologies will help to reduce losses during the extreme weather events such as GLOBs and landslide lake outburst floods, which is common in Nepal and India and other countries also. For example, the GLOB in Tibet was responsible for the destructive Bhotekoshi river flood of July 2016 in Nepal. So if we could have received information from the China on time, the losses could have been minimized. So it is also, the regional cooperation will also aid in promoting joint research and common themes such as glacier melting, droughts, etc., thereby helping South Asian countries, to bring the strong evidences of the impact of temperature rise on our economy in the COP26 and lobby for the 1.5 degree centigrade world scenario. Glacier melting, landslides, floods will not only affect Nepal, but also it will impact India and Bangladesh, because all the rivers are connected in these countries. Similarly, food insecurity and shortages of water will, create temporary migration in Nepal. So the male laborers will go to India, and there will be more pressure on the women farmers, and with the rising food insecurity, their condition will further deteriorate, and I believe that they will be further marginalized and become more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Therefore, I believe that the role of ADPC is important, as it can bring experiences of countries together and foster for coordination and collaboration, which is very much required for fighting against one of the greatest threat humans are facing on Earth, which is climate change. Thank you.
And with that, may I thank our contributors for their valuable contributions. The IPCC report has certainly created a reaction that we all hope will turn into practical and tangible actions. If you have any comments or questions, please communicate them through the ADPC website, as this is, of course, an ongoing issue. But for now, thank you for joining us. We will return with another edition of Climate Talks in September. Until then, goodbye.